Hello everyone. I wanted to share really quickly with you all a really incredible travel reflection moment that I had. I've been trying to find accommodation in Paris. Right now I'm staying in the 17th arrondissement near Champs-Elysées and the Arc D'Triomphe. It's basically a very bougie area. So the place where I'm staying, there's a lot of like government buildings. A lot of the people that live here are very wealthy people, diplomats, government officials, wealthy people. I'm staying at an Airbnb right now, and my host, she's a very, very sweet girl from China, a woman from China. She's very, very, very sweet and kind. But you know, she's just kind of emphasizing to me just the grandness of the location, the security, the prestige of the area. And so, you know, I told her, oh well, I'm looking for permanent accommodation, blah blah blah. And you know, she was telling me, giving me advice, what arrondissements are best, or you know, whatever. And I also did some of my own research online about, you know, where I should be living, if there are any places I should look out for. And there is a few arrondissements, the higher numbered arrondissements, that people just said to steer clear from. As it turns out, these arrondissements are made up of immigrant communities, and I realized who was writing these articles. Mostly the people that can afford to come to Paris. You know, it is very biased perspective, right? Because a lot of the people, like the immigrant people with fewer resources, are not sitting at computers writing reviews about what arrondissements are best or whatever, you know, not like that. But I have to say that I gave into the stigma. And I am very ashamed of it. I am very ashamed that I was even for a second in that mind frame. I am a woman of color. I come from an immigrant community. How is it that I was, you know, in Paris, kind of like out of my element, but within the scheme of a similar element? You know what I mean? It's difficult to explain, but it was a similar situation, but it wasn't my particular situation. It wasn't my immigrant communities. And so for a few days, I kind of gave into the stigma of the things that I read, you know. And besides, I had been in that area prior when I was studying abroad in Paris like 2 years ago. And I do remember just seeing a lot of immigrant people, a lot of people of color, people outside of the traditional scheme of the French, of the bougie, the proper, the very composed, the gallery, museum trotting people of Paris, you know, the stereotypical, the stereotypical Parisian. And when I was, you know, I found a place actually, but it was it's in the 10th arrondissement, which borders some of these, you know, immigrant communities, shady area arrondissements per the people of the internet. And as I was walking there, I was coming across, like, you know, groups of people of color, you know, boys, groups of boys just kind of huddled, people being very loud on the street, people kind of approaching me to compliment me, but in a catcally kind of way. I don't know if that makes sense. I was kind of feeding into the fear, you know, which was already underlined with all the things that I had read. And I was walking through a park, and I saw a couple homeless people, and I guess I was reflecting, and as I was walking by, I just kind of realized that I was seeing people that were like my people, that I was, you know, if I was a foreigner and I was in the US and I was walking by a Home Depot where there's a bunch of immigrant people, like I can, like, you know, it was kind of like a similar thing, but not really, but kind of, if that makes any sense. But I just realized, like, you know, people who don't come from the same place, people who don't get it because, you know, not by their fault that they don't get it, but just because they're not in that situation, the way they talk about immigrants in France is how other people talk about immigrants in the US, and most of it is just rooted in fear and a bunch of bull. So I thought, oh my God, Anna, what are you doing? How even could you place yourself in this horrific mindset? And I realized how toxic that mindset was, and how I was already giving into the stigma, giving into the fear, and how I was already placing these people in a box and already ascribing them certain characteristics that I made up in my mind or that people told me they had. So I just kind of like a switch flipped. I put on another filter, and I remembered thinking what I thought the first time that I came to that area, which was, this is the real authentic Paris. It's not just the Eiffel Tower, not just what we see on the postcards, but it's this. This is globalization. It's what I studied. This is it. And this is beautiful. Look at all these people enriching this community. And, you know, I remembered the kebabs the Turkish kebabs that I adored, and the Greek gyros, and all of the Chinese food places that I saw, that I was intrigued, and I just saw all of this diversity and this coexistence that was beautiful. A lot of immigrants with a lot of, you know, generations and generations of French people, like people with generations of French ancestry, people who were just the second generation or the first French-born generation to immigrant parents, and I just saw like this nice diversity, and oh my God, it was so cool. But you know, I had that moment where I was, it's truly shameful for me to even admit that that's something that went through my head, but it, you know, I'm being honest, and in self-reflection and growth, it's very important to be honest with yourself, and it's important to acknowledge what you feel and why you feel it and how you feel it. And so in acknowledging all of this and in really understanding what was happening to me, I have a better sense of what happens to other people. I have another sense of what happens to somebody who was born in, I don't know, like Ohio or somewhere in the South or something like that, that comes to maybe like California and kind of is like, whoa, sanctuary state, like, you know, I understand a little bit more, and it gives me a bit it gives me empathy, and it allows me to converse with people knowing from where they come from, which is really important, I think, in dialogue and in compromise and in all those kinds of things. Anyways, I just wanted to share that, and that is definitely a moment of me being a Latina in another country. I was like taken out of my world, my box, my context, placed in a similar context, but that was not my context, and man, it allowed me to just kind of reflect and experience. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really important to acknowledge these things and to think about them and to learn from them, so I feel a little bit better equipped to have a conversation maybe with like someone who traditionally I might not have understood on this kind of level, because I kind of went through it. So anyways, yeah, I hope you enjoy.